Hello, welcome to the Stockout. This is your show at FreightWaves for all things related to CPG and retail industries. I'm one of your hosts, Mike Baudendistel, joined by Grace. Good to see you, Grace.
Good to see you, Mike. Happy, I guess, post holiday weekend that snuck up, I think, at least on me. And a happy April Fool's Day, even though I don't have a joke ready for you, but maybe we'll sneak one in here. We'll see.
Nothing is planned on my side, so if we do
Yeah.
have something, it will be completely impromptu here. So what we have today, talk a little bit about Baltimore. I'm not going to spend all day on this because we have lots and lots of coverage on the site, but just wanted to get your perspective on it. Also going to talk about Shein. I think that's probably going to be the topic of the show. Sort of do a dive into that. A lot of interesting things going on with Shein, opening up their supply chain to other designers and manufacturers. We can talk a little bit about the Home Depot news, acquiring that big, building products company, and then maybe just give a little bit of a freight market update. So that'll how we'll spend the next 24 minutes or so. If anyone's not already signed up for the Stockout newsletter, would encourage people to go to www.freightwaves.com/the stockout and sign up for the newsletter. I tend to get one of these newsletters out every week towards the end of the week. So please do that. And with that, just wanted to ask you, Grace, based on your experience in brokerage, with the Baltimore Bridge coming down, Francis Scott Key Bridge coming down, anything stand out from your experience with brokering loads in or out of Baltimore?
I think the biggest thing is two things I'm looking at. Those who, of course, are providing any type of drayage services out in and out of that port, I think are going to be clearly greatly affected, not just by
Mm-hmm.
clearly the volume question, but I mean, how exactly you're going to be coming in and out of that area in particular, right? Just with traffic, I'm sure changing habits over the next well, it sounds like more than a few months, but over a pretty long period of time, especially for such a populated area. That does concern me, and this also is just an odd area of the United States as well in terms of traffic flows and the fastest way to get to certain places. Whenever you're moving in and out of that area, it's always something you want to watch in terms of exact miles that drivers will be taking and what roads they can take and what is actually faster for drivers too. So I think just having that bridge unaccessible will be a problem in and of itself. And I mean, honestly, like we're going to see capacity, I'm sure, drop out of the area if there's companies that are used to coming in and out of there. I'm sure they're going to be looking at different lanes and routes moving forward. And there's always a question of like, will they find better business that doesn't lead them down that path? Is this something that could change the capacity flows in that area for an extended period of time, even if that bridge comes up, right? Depending on when I think we're in a uh, unfortunately in a really great market to maybe avoid that situation because there's not much to choose from anyways. But if the market does turn around and we see possibly other situations available for drivers that tend to go into that area knowing they're going to get certain freight out of there, we might not see that capacity return to the area as well. So yeah, it's I'm interested in like watching some of the sonar charts. I think we might go over some here in a second, but watching some of those over the next couple of months and seeing how traffic and capacity does respond to it too.
Yeah, there's some takeaways from sonar that you can just pull off and to see right immediately. Like just can see that Baltimore is a backhaul market, so we have this van head haul index there
Yeah.
in white, and you see that's a negative number. So more dry van freight comes into Baltimore than leaves. That makes sense. It's a highly populated area. And then kind of interesting, the reefer, it's a head haul market. You see that green line. So there's more reefer freight comes out of Baltimore than goes in. I don't know if that's because of seafood or what that might be, but I don't know if you have any ideas on that. But there's also some interesting stats that we can pull out of sonar. Some of these Zach Strickland, our Sultan of Sonar, gave to me. He said some 31,000 people cross the Francis Scott Key Bridge every day. So there's a lot of commuter traffic, a lot of truck traffic.
Yeah.
It says Port of Baltimore handles the fourth volume on the East Coast behind Savannah, in Savannah, Georgia. So only about a fourth of the volume in Savannah. So if you look at this sonar chart on the relative impact of the various ports on rail traffic, is an interesting one. If you can bring that up, the outbound total rail container volume. So you see Baltimore is all the way down in the red at the bottom. So this is the outbound rail container
Uh,
volume for rail intermodal. And so it's not a big outbound area for intermodal, despite all the containers coming off the port. And really the reason for that is there's at a disadvantage being up in the Chesapeake, and also a disadvantage because of the Howard Street Tunnel, which limits the ability to double stack the containers. So it shouldn't have too big of an impact on rail intermodal. I agree with you on drayage. I mean, a lot of the freight that comes into Baltimore stays local. So according to some of our data, 36% of the tender volume coming out of Baltimore stays in Maryland. Another 22% goes to Pennsylvania, and 15% goes to Virginia. So it really is kind of these neighboring states that are going to be more impacted. So it seems like something to me that's going to be more impacted regionally than nationwide, maybe with the caveat that there are certain industries that really rely on the Port of Baltimore. I've taken a couple of tours of the Port of Baltimore in the past, and one of the interesting ones was seeing just all the motor vehicle traffic on the Ro-Ro portion of it. So it's the biggest Ro-Ro port, and they showed us all, as far as I can see, you see these luxury import vehicles from Europe coming in, Lamborghinis, et cetera. And then after doing that, they say, okay, well, now we're going to show you the expensive cargo. I'm like, well, what's the expensive cargo if it's not the Lamborghinis? And it's military tanks, helicopters, any manner of industrial equipment, including things I've never seen before in my life. So just piece of equipment that costs millions of dollars. So it's kind of an interesting thing. And the other thing they said that I thought was interesting was like if you take a brand like a Caterpillar, you think of that as being okay, U.S. company from Illinois, but in order to know whether that's coming or going through the port, you would have to look at the exact routing information, because there are Caterpillar pieces of equipment that are imported as much as exported. So that was interesting. And then there's also they're one of the biggest coal export terminals that's on the other side of the bay. There, both CSX and Norfolk Southern have coal export terminals, so it could impact that industry greatly as well. So really, kind of automotive and coal would be kind of the areas that I would look at as maybe having a big impact.
yeah. One question to you too is how do you think that'll affect the market for New Jersey and New York, right? Because I would assume that a lot of this would be
Mm-hmm.
routed up that way in an area that's already sees so much traffic to begin with. That's seems like quite a nightmare for that, I guess, change up too.
Yeah, I think the container ships would have to call in a different port. I mean, the port does say, like, even though they're best known for their ro activity, it's really sort of the containers that are kind of their bread and butter. So as far as the port's income is concerned, so probably a lot of it goes to Norfolk, I would think, or Charleston, sort of further
True,
south.
true,
Because you're
yeah.
right. I mean, there's so much congestion up north typically. But yeah, lots of stuff on the site about that. Just FreightWaves plus Baltimore. Get lots of things there.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, want to move on to a topic which I know that you follow closely is Shein. So Shein is going to launch the supply chain as a service model. So for those who are not familiar with Shein, I'll do my best to explain the business model.
I
So
love this.
no physical stores; it's all online. They sell fashion items for just a few dollars, $2 shirts, $7 pants. All of it virtually is manufactured in China. They're trying to diversify that, but for the most part, it's China. They do have a lot of third party manufacturing, so a lot of contract manufacturing, which might be part of their issue. We'll get into all manufactured in very small batches. They have these online orders, and so they're looking at sort of the daily activity, maybe hourly activity of what people order, what people search for, and they
Yeah.
manufacture based on that. So very small batches. And so there's not going to be a lot of excess inventory. That cuts the inventory waste in the fashion industry by like 30 or 40%. It's cheaper materials, and it goes from China to the US via air freight, which is unusual for clothing, but it's the only way to make it a high degree of service, and still the products get to you in 10 to 12 days, which in this day and age, that seems like an eternity when Amazon can get you something in a day. But they don't have the inventory, a mile from your house. It has to be manufactured, it has to be sent over, et cetera. So is that sort of the basic business model?
I
It's
was
a low quality product for a low price, but fashion trends go in and out of style, so maybe that's okay.
Yeah, it's you hit the nail on the head. I mean, for a second I was like, oh, maybe this will be our April Fool's joke for the audience, having you explain. But yeah, it's fast fashion. I mean, if anyone has bought off Shein, or clearly, if you're probably a female my age, younger, older as well, you've seen these ads all over Facebook, Instagram, social media sites, etc. They have a really good relationship with influencers, so you tend to see a lot of almost that promotion through those different ways as well. It is incredible how quickly they can see a trend, create that brand, and yeah, almost ship it to you just in time for that trend to be closely out of style. And they have had their issues in the past because of that watching of trends of trademark issues, which I am, lightly concerned about in this situation. Like, how are the designs shared? Are they using those manufacturers? Do those manufacturers get any of the licensing capabilities of that? How does that setup look like? That would be my concern if I was a brand looking to use this service. Right? It's like, will I? This kind of comes up, and even with Amazon, frequently, it's like, if I do use your site and your logistics for my brand, is there a chance that you could steal that idea as well? So it's interesting. It's I think they do have a really well established supply chain, and even though it does take 10 to 12 days, I'm interested in if this will kind of allow them uh, a little bit more of, I guess, volume to bring that close to the United States, and actually help the U.S. consumer get the products a little bit faster as well.
Yeah, and so the news last week was that they're launching their supply chain as a service. So they have this established supply chain, and they're opening this up to other brands and designs, which I guess don't really have any other affiliation with Shein. I mean, potentially you could just have your own design or own brand, and start something up, and then leverage Shein's infrastructure to get something to market. So it's kind of Sheinify the supply chain. So interesting things there. There are some controversies that you bring up the thing about the intellectual property. So maybe that's the one thing on our list. I think we have a total of four things. The other thing is the environmental concern, which is something like, especially in Europe, they're concerned with. Like France wants to limit the degree of advertising that Shein's allowed to do because they're concerned about the environmental impact. I guess it's the idea is the clothes fall apart quickly. There's lots of packaging material. These things are individually packaged because they're inexpensive. People buy a lot of it. So there's
Yeah.
the environmental concern. There's also the circumventing the import duties, which I guess if something is sent to an individual and it's less than $800, because they wouldn't be sending it to a big distributor, they'd be sending it just to an individual that it circumvents the any import duties or tariffs, because it's considered a de minimis shipment, which I think the intention of that law is when you go on vacation, you bring back some souvenirs, you don't have to declare that and pay
Yeah.
an import duty on that. But so some might consider that a loophole, but it seems to be within the law. And then there's maybe the biggest one, which is labor. So that's because there's a lack of visibility in the supply chain. It's manufactured in China. They haven't disclosed where all this manufacturing is taking place. The
Yes. Yeah.
suspicion is that it's forced labor by the Uyghur population. I don't know that there's a smoking gun about that,
Yeah.
but that's certainly the suspicion given the lack of visibility. And I think the reason why some people in Congress want to block the IPO, or at least to have an audit of it before there is an IPO.
Yeah, there was a there was a panel I did at CSCMP this past year where there's we should probably actually working again on the show, an incredible woman who had worked decades in customs border protection for this country, and there was a company in China that kind of the same thing here, used like thousands of different manufacturers within China to produce certain items, and she told a story about how they had went and visited, got all the addresses, and just went on the ground in China and started visiting these locations. And I mean, a lot of them are just like homes, poor family homes that are there literally sewing and manufacturing clothing. You're 1,000% right. I mean, there's a reason a lot of these tops are $4 because they're made to wear once, maybe like you go to a party and if it gets damaged you're like, whatever, I'll just throw this away, and talk about environmental problems there on top of that. But it is interesting, especially, I think in this situation, right, there's like 5,400 different companies, manufacturers they're working with. How many of those are following, the labor laws 100%, and how many of those are ethically held to U.S. standards? I would say probably, to make a good bet, likely not most of them. So it is interesting with this offering, like how I'm interested in how transparent they're going to be with brands who might have these questions, especially seeing that I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on fashion companies and retailers in the next, I'd say, less than a decade to start showcasing, and they are responsible at the end of the day for customs to know who those manufacturers are, and what laws they are following or might not be following. So it's if I was a brand and I was considering it, I would walk into that discussion with caution and a lot of questions before probably moving forward with that plan too. But it's a smart one if they're willing to open that up. I mean, and people do have a positive impact from it. This maybe could lead to that IPO situation, but again, I'd have a lot of questions going into it for sure.
Yeah, I can give them a pass on everything except the labor. Honestly, like the environmental concerns. Well, I mean, is anything we do that environmentally friendly? I mean, other brands, when things don't get sold and there's excess inventory, they shred the clothing so to not destroy the brand, so people don't go dumpster diving. Like, is that environmentally friendly? So to me, it's like environmental. I think it's hard to account for that. The circumventing import duties. I think they're following the law there. If the law needs to be changed, someone should change the law. But I don't think they're doing anything illegal there. The IP concerns, I think, that's always kind of a gray area too. I mean, intellectual property for a certain piece of clothing, there gets into be gray areas. What actually needs to be changed before it's you're no longer violating the IP, which those are difficult to really get your arms around sometimes. But yeah, the labor issue is kind of what gives me pause. I don't want to. If I was the target market, which I'm clearly not, I don't want to buy something where there is human rights abuses in there. So,
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the ultimate question about the company, but we'll definitely follow it. I hope they do file a public prospectus, because it'll give us stuff to talk about. We'll really go
True.
through it closely if they do that. But I want to move on to the next topic here. Home Depot acquires SRS Distribution. I have a stock chart here on Home Depot, which basically shows you it's pretty much close to its all-time high. This wasn't a one that ran up during the pandemic and then fell apart like some stocks did. It's been pretty resilient. It's been a good holding for me. I own some shares, personally. Here, so they acquired this SRS building project supplier, which primarily deals with contractors. It seems like it's this is more of a specialty store. It was privately held, targets professional contractors and builders. So the Home Depot sales mix is split pretty closely between professionals and just kind of the regular consumers that are fixing up their own homes with renovations. They seem to think the professionals are certainly the better customers, because they're going to be buying lots from them sort of no matter what. It does seem like the home renovation trend has fallen apart. It was largely related to low interest rates. A lot of people finance home renovations by taking a home equity loan, figuring that they'll take money out of their home to put the money back into their home. Ultimately, that's kind of justified there. But then the interest rates got in the way of that. But then you also had just stimulus money and people with time who took on projects during the pandemic, lacking other opportunities. So it seems like Home Depot's doing this. They think really that the professional segment's the place to be. I mean, any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty huge. My question to you is, from your experience on this, do you think that there's a couple of articles have brought up, right, the FTC and of course the fun that they've
Mhm.
had over the last couple of years, diving into a lot of these mergers, acquisitions that we've covered on this show. Uh, I I'd have to look into, I guess, the especially professional side of this market. But from your experience, do you think this is something that the FTC is going to hold up?
It's been hard to predict anything the FTC is doing. I mean, it just seems like lately, if you've bet on the FTC taking a very aggressive stance against mergers, you've been right. Now, to me, I don't think most people knew who SR. I mean, at least from the consumer segment, it's completely different. So you'd have to set that
Yeah.
aside. But to me, I mean, I think it's probably not anti-competitive. But I've thought that about a lot of things that the FTC has tried to stop. So
Yeah,
I don't know exactly what the market concentration is for professional builders, but to me, at least on the surface, doesn't seem anti-competitive.
same here. And that's maybe we'll look into that and something we can follow up next week too. But it doesn't. I mean, being as big as it is, maybe it's something to look into. But yeah, I think it's great and excited for Home Depot. I mean, there's been a lot of interesting investments they've also made in their logistics technologies and partnerships. I know they had a really interesting partnership with like LoadSmart in the past that we covered, and even for just Home Depot in general, like they've done a really great job leveraging their flatbed market and using that volume of and especially that specialty of trailer to flip it and help those carriers find loads after they deliver at Home Depots too. So I would imagine that this type of acquisition is just going to even help with that as well. So I'm kind of excited to see what happens just with the improvements in their own supply chain from this, let alone what they're going to be doing in regards to helping with the professional, more construction side of things as well. So hopefully we'll keep an eye on that too, and I'll reach out, maybe get an interview or something and see how that improves. But again, this is just some really great more flatbed freight for that group of suppliers for Home Depot as well.
Yeah, I mean, I consider it one of the best run retailers there is. So,
Yeah.
so always interested to see what they're doing. Just have a couple minutes here. Any thoughts on the first quarter freight market? First quarter just wrapped up yesterday. Here we are in April 1st. Tender rejection rates below 4%. You didn't really have a big March surge. I mean, was that the big takeaway?
Yeah, that's probably the big takeaway. It's funny, I've been doing some interviews with brokers recently in particular, and uh, even just did one this morning where I mean a lot of them are like, "Where's produce season?" Kind of like getting ready for that, like hoping for that just juice squeeze in early April, if anything. But I think, especially in the brokerage side, a lot of people struggled this Q1, not seeing that bounce back that they're used to in March. Clearly, we've seen it too. We did a nice update on the radio and diving into like the NTI and some other markets as well, and just not seeing the response that we're used to seeing. So I've heard over and over again, like hopefully an early produce season, something to like catch up and get things moving in some of these offices, but it's not looking great so far, and I'm interested as we get like over the next like 15 days what we see at the beginning of April too to kind of get things moving, but not looking too hot right now. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big quarter for imports,
True.
activity at the ports, international intermodal was up over 20% year over year. It was against an easy comp, but well ahead of domestic intermodal, which is something we can see in Sonar breaking those segments out. So it'll be interesting when domestic intermodal companies report earnings if that was baked into analyst models, or if they were just using the AAR data, which conflates international and domestic intermodal. So that was kind of one of the big trends for me. Which demonstrates that there's plenty of international containers if the container ship lines are willing to send those containers inland via IPI to places, inland destinations. So yeah, so that's kind of the big thing, on the intermodal side. But still, it seems like there's plenty of capacity on intermodal as well as truckload.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, I want to say excited for next week. Next Monday is going to be my birthday, so we get to have a nice birthday
Okay.
episode here. And that is not an April Fool's joke. And we'll have Daily Harvest here as well for our viewers, listeners, however you're getting this content. So make sure everyone go check out our newsletter, top of the page at freightwaves.com. Click on the Stockout, join that so you get also a discount code for our event coming up in June, which I'm very excited for. So make sure you go to live.freightwaves.com to check out that event as well. But other than that, Mike and I will be back next week to celebrate my birthday and learn more about Daily Harvest's supply chain as well.